Immediate aftermath of when we're out there at the scene, firearms still drawn. My detective training is preserve this crime scene. I'm seeing blood dripping onto my foot from my injuries. I think I'm probably going to die while standing here. The member of the public who was in one of the residential apartments, he'd heard the gunshot and he came out.
Yep.
He had a mobile phone with him. The AFP acting team leader came out, he had his firearm out, and he comes up to me and goes, "What's happened?" I'm thinking it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I've just shot him. Got the AFP member to get the phone off the member of the public, phone 000 and say, 2 police have been stabbed, I need 2 ambulances and I need more police resources here. I don't want mum and dad citizen driving in through the crime scene, kids looking out the window at a body and a police officer that's just shot them.
As an operational police officer, when someone's life has been taken, you feel like you're a bad guy too. Like it's almost like you've been looked at as a suspect.
I experienced that within about 5 minutes.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers. Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with former Victorian Police Officer Niall and Australian Federal Police Officer Matt. If you listen to part 1, we were talking about an incident that occurred in 2014 where you guys were both stabbed in a terrorist attack that resulted in the person who stabbed you being shot and killed. So, Niall, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you.
And Matt,
Thanks,
welcome
Gary.
back.
Thank you.
Again, guys, I put up front, I apologise putting you guys through this. Yeah, you're talking about an incident that is a heavy incident, and you're sitting there bravely, it hasn't impacted. But what you described to me, that's a fear that we all have as police officers, that we're going to get caught up in an incident like that. And you guys saw it, lived it, and survived it. Can we pick up the podcast now from you were in the police station, Matt, and you've realised the extent of your injuries.
Yep.
Ambulance have been called, and they gave you the happy gas and off to hospital.
Yep.
So we'll leave you there in your happy space there for a bit.
Yep.
Okay, Niall, you've been stabbed and you've just taken a person's life. I haven't, in my experience, seen any police officer that it doesn't have an impact on. Do you want to talk us through what was going through your mind after that incident?
Yeah, for sure. Look, in the immediate aftermath of when we're out there at the scene, firearms still drawn, my detective training is preserve this crime scene. So a member of the public who was in one of the residential apartments, he'd heard the gunshot and he came out.
Yeah.
He had a mobile phone with him. At the exact same time, one of the AFP acting team leader came out. He had his firearm out and he comes up to me and goes, "What's happened?" And at that stage, I'm thinking it's pretty obvious, isn't it? So I responded, "I've just shot him." And the AFP member then asked, "Where's Newman?" Which I said, "That's him."
Mm.
And at that stage, I knew I cannot pass this crime scene over to this member, because he's not even on the same level of what we're talking about with this incident.
Mm.
So I then got the AFP member to get the phone off the member of the public, phone 000 and say, 2 police have been stabbed, I need 2 ambulances and I need more police resources here. A young constable comes out from the police station, so I advise him to go inside, get some crime scene tape, and we'll block the road off, because at this stage, I don't want mum and dad citizen driving in through the crime scene, kids looking out the window at a body and a police officer that's just shot them. So that's traumatic itself for a member of the public. So preserving the crime scene was part of it, and then asking the member of the public to go inside, get a blanket, and would cover the body over. That never happened in regard to the blanket coming out, but the offer was made. And then the young constable asked him to get the personal protection kit and bandage up my injuries. So all while my firearm's still out covering the target, my feet are glued to the spot. I'm seeing blood dripping onto my foot from my injuries. And at that stage, I think I'm probably going to die while standing here from the blood loss. But the sense of duty as a detective was to remain there until I can pass this scene off to another detective. Fortunately for me, it was a couple of minutes later. One of my colleagues who I'd worked with at Piranha Task Force was now a Dandenong detective, and he turned up, and I was able to tell him where my diary was, the name of the offender, and said, by the way, he's a terrorist, so we're going to need more resources out here for
Mm.
the bomb response for the vehicle and similar. So at that stage, firearm seized, placed in
So
the
you,
back of the
you've
ambulance.
you've kicked into the police mode, or the whole thing was police mode, but you've kicked into that. What people I don't think appreciate when you're involved in situations like that, critical incidents that are referred to in policing, that there's an investigation, and quite often you feel like, and quite rightly, you've got to be able to justify your actions when someone's been shot and killed. But in incidents I've been involved in as an operational police officer, when someone's life has been taken, you feel like you're a bad guy too. Like it's almost like you've been looked at as a suspect, and it might be subtle, and everyone tries to say the right things, but people look at you and go, "What have you done? Yeah, how did this happen?"
I
So
experienced that within about 5 minutes, Gary,
yeah,
that exact theory, and that is in the back of the ambulance. Now, I know police procedure. We'll have a police member travelling with me
mm,
for security, but also recording anything that I say. Now, because I was plain clothes, the only thing I had on that represented me as a member of Victoria Police was my lanyard with identification. Now, without asking, the constable in the back of the ambulance with me ripped that lanyard off me. So essentially, my identity as a police officer when that lanyard went
yeah,
was, as you say, I thought, hang on, I'm now being looked at as the crook here, and it's up to me to justify my actions, not the
yeah.
other way around. So, yeah, that was a really traumatic experience, just having that lanyard ripped away from me in that fashion.
It adds to the trauma, doesn't it? Getting back to you, Matt. We've got you in the ambulance now, Niall, and your experience at the hospital. Did you did you have concerns you were going to die?
Um, I was in a bit of pain in the ambulance, and the I guess the chest wound was a bit unknown, I
Mm,
guess, and I was sort of sucking on the green whistle, and so the pain was okay, but then sort of rolling into oh, sorry, we're driving along in the ambulance, and there was a police constable similar to
yeah,
Niall. She was in the recording things that I was saying, and I said, "Look, you got to call my wife and let her know." And so anyway, so she's made that phone call, and sort of by the time I got into the Alfred, um, my wife and my sons were there, or were arriving just after I got there. I can't exactly remember, but I was sort of taken into the emergency department, and the doctors and nurses all started to come in and start treating me, and I remember the main doctor there, Dr. Helen Sturgio, and I'm thinking, this is a bit surreal. They're not yelling. They're not. It's not bright lights.
mm,
It's not like you see TV shows. ER. Oh, we got to do this. We got to do that.
yeah.
It was the most calm setting that I've ever been in or experienced in relation to something so horrific. And so I was lying there, and I remember my wife at the time, now my ex-wife, and my two sons were sort of standing over just to my right. And as I was lying on the trolley in the emergency department, and the doctors were talking, and Helen was standing at the head of the bed and saying, "Okay, we've got to look at this, and okay, Matt, look, what we think we might have to do is open chest surgery." So because then they weren't sure
Yeah.
about the wound and where it had gone and whatever. So that was when I sort of got a little bit concerned, because that's a pretty major operation to crack open your ribs and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. Um, and so my wife at the time and my boys, they were listening to all of this, And I sort of looked over, and they're all, well, my wife and my oldest son were in tears, and the youngest one was a bit stoic, but I'll get to that point later. And anyway, so they're treating and talking to me, but keeping me really calm, but so I felt, while I sort of felt Jesus is pretty serious, I felt really, just really well looked after. And the doctor's taken the bandage off my head, where I've been cut down the side here, and like I said, there was a small artery just near my temple that was causing the main
Yeah.
sort of bleeding. Anyway, it spurted and hit him in the face. And I was laying there and went, "Oh, gee, sorry, mate," and had a bit of a giggle at that. And then Helen had a crack at him, because she said, "What are you doing? Get out there now. You've got to be tested, and all this sort of stuff," because he wasn't wearing a face
Oh, right.
mask
Yeah.
and all
Okay.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, a bit of comic relief at times when we were in there. But anyway, they took me off, did a CT scan, and came back, and um, and then I went off to surgery, and they just sort of patched up my eye for the time being, but operated on my shoulder and my
And
liver.
with the eye injury, was that a concern for you? Like, you'd be thinking, what's happened here? Like, I disfigured my eye. I'm going to get my eyesight, or
Yeah,
all those thoughts that would go through your mind as well.
I don't know how it didn't, but the knife for somehow went down through my eyebrow, missed my eyelid, and then continued just down here. So it would have missed my eye by
Right.
like less than a
I've been
millimeter.
sitting here
Yeah.
looking, wondering whether that you've
Yep.
got a replacement eye in there, a
No,
glass eye,
no,
because
no.
I'm looking at the scar. I'm thinking, how did it miss that
I
eye?
don't know. Just lucky in an unlucky situation, I
Yeah.
guess. And yeah, and so I had that surgery, and then and so they just sort of patched this up, and then
Yeah.
a couple of days later, the plastic surgeon operated on the facial stuff.
Okay. So trauma for you, trauma for your family. Yeah,
Yep.
you don't want to see your kids and your wife going through
No.
that. Your experience, Niall, at hospital?
Yeah, so as I'm in the ambulance about to be taken away, I say to the attending detective, knowing our procedures, someone will knock
Yeah.
on my wife's door.
Yeah.
And the assumption at 9 p.m. at night, if two police are knocking on your door,
It's
is
not
that
good.
essentially your husband's dead. So I sent my wife a text message saying I'm okay, thinking that will be seen as a bit of a proof of life from her.
Mm.
I asked the detective to give her a phone call. As usual, his phone went flat, so he couldn't make the phone call to preempt it that police will come around. He's okay, those things. So I went to Dandenong Hospital, which was about 15 minutes away from where the incident occurred. Um, and as we spoke about, with the lanyard being ripped off, that was really demoralising and made you feel like a crook. The one thing that really changed that, once I got placed in the emergency ward, the Assistant Commissioner Steve Fontana, who was in charge of Crime Command at that stage, came out to my hospital bed in uniform, and he was holding my hand. And that for me was so reassuring for that 5 minutes. There was police from Victoria Police and the Australian Federal Police in the room, because we've always spoken about in Joint Counterterrorism Team, it's not about our badge, it's not about our organisations, it's about that
together.
team. So to see we had both organisations in that room with me was another heartfelt moment. My wife came into the room, we hugged, and she had some tears. Spoke to mum and dad on the phone. They live in country Victoria. They'd been listening to this incident on the radio. There was some wildly inaccurate reporting about one of the stations reported that potentially Newman had been shot while running into the police station, which for mum and dad, they're thinking, well, he's been shot in the back, and the implications that would bring with it.
Yeah.
So there was that. There was another report a couple of days later that I'd shot Newman at point blank range in the head while he was on top of Matt, stabbing him obviously inaccurate as well, and makes my professionalism, brings that into account as to
Yeah.
what my response is. In the ambulance, the ambo says to me, "Have you got any more stab wounds anywhere else?" Which made my heart beat a little bit faster, thinking, "Shit, I actually don't know." So I lift up my shirt, and thankfully there was no wounds there. And I told the ambo that I'm A positive, which freaked him out. And I said, "No, no, that's my blood type," thinking that I might need blood to
Yeah.
replace it. So taken Dandenong, had 2 nights in there. My initial reactions while I was in the bed, the two things I wanted to know was, what do the public think about my actions out here tonight?
Yeah.
And what does Victoria Police think about my actions? Those were the two things closest to my mind. My phone was going off with messages from colleagues of support, which, as you know, Gary, in policing, is very rare until your retirement date that you actually get validation of how much valued
Mm.
you are and appreciated. So my phone was receiving a lot of messages. So I'd be in between having doctors come in, reading some messages, crying away at the such lovely messages.
Mm.
The next day, and myself and Matt obviously couldn't speak to each other until we'd given our statements to homicide. So I wanted to know how Matt was going, and I'm sure he wanted to know how I was going as well.
Yeah, on that, and this is where, and a couple of things that you've been through this incident, and I'm sitting here watching you guys talk about it, and your concern is not, thankfully I survived, or Matt survived. It's, do I do the right thing? How will people? And it's just ingrained into police, isn't it? You feel like you're going to be to blame, and the fact you two, and I always struggled with this when I was leading critical investigations. You two have been caught up in this incident that clearly you want to talk about for emotional support. You've just been through something, and you have to keep the people separated. And that's hard, isn't it? And it makes you feel like you've done something wrong. Why are we being separated? And that's, in police shootings, that's just the nature of the way they're investigated. And saying that, I think we all sit here and we understand the need for accountability. It has to be. But it's just another layer of the things that you go through when you've been involved in a critical incident like this.
Yeah, you're right. So, as well as having my clothing seized for ballistic testing in regard to it with gunshot residue, um, it was also one of my detective sergeant, Tony Mars. He'd started leave the day before. He came in and stayed at my hospital for 2 days. Didn't go home, and he'd come into my room, and all I wanted to do was to talk about it. And of course, he would have had to have recorded in his notebook anything I said.
Mm.
So he had to get me onto another topic straight away,
Yeah.
which all I wanted to do was to be able to speak to police welfare, which I did.
Yeah.
The chief commissioner at the time, Ken Lay, came to see me. The AFP commissioner at the time was Andrew Colvin, and the commissioner came into my room and spoke to me one on one. And I remember saying to him, "Boss, you know I'm not one of yours, don't you?" And he goes, "I know that, but you'll be treated like one." And so whatever Victoria Police offered to me, the AFP also offered the exact same
Yeah.
thing, whether it was chaplaincy, wellbeing services. So really well supported by both organisations in the immediate aftermath.
Yeah.
And then seeing after I gave my statement, I was checking the media of the time, and Luke Cornelius, the Assistant Commissioner at the time of Southern Metro Region where it occurred, he was there saying it's clearly obvious the two members have been attacked and they've defended themselves, self-defense, rah, rah, which is, to be essentially cleared on the night is very unusual in regards to that.
Most definitely. Normally, police won't come out and make a comment.
Absolutely.
Like that.
So again, that provided me with some comfort to know that I'd had the immediate backing from Victoria Police Command, but also the next morning there were some flowers that had turned up in my hospital bed from a member of the public, and with some really nice sentiments. So
Yeah.
the two questions that were burning in my brain about how does the public feel? Well, it was answered with the flowers, and how does Victoria Police feel? That was answered with a press conference.
Okay. Um, Matt, how long were you in hospital for your recovery?
Yeah, I was in there for a week.
Yeah.
So got out on, I think, the Monday, um, and gave my statement, I think, on the Saturday, which was actually AFL Grand Final day.
Right.
So, and then, and
Does
that was,
anyone care? Because you're a Parramatta supporter. Like,
no.
you just threw that in.
Yeah.
You made them come and get
Yeah.
a statement on AFL Grand Final day, did
Yeah,
you? Just to
yeah.
annoy them.
Yeah, maybe. It was actually morning. So, but the funny thing actually was that the Professor Mark Fitzgerald, who's in charge of the sort of the trauma area of the Alfred, and very highly respected. I had a great deal to do with him.
Yeah.
He would come and check on me and this sort of thing. And he said, "Oh, what are your plans for? What do you want to do on Grand Final day?" And I said, "Oh, well, we've only got this crappy TV up here and whatever." Anyway, so Grand Final morning, a Sony Bravia TV comes into the room and gets set up, and because the family were coming in, and we
Yeah.
were going to watch the Grand Final
Yep.
that afternoon. Just as sort of a bit of a get together, and but that morning I gave my statement, and then Niall and his family came in, and my mum and dad were there, and they'd come down from New South Wales, and I remember Niall coming into the room, and like we said, we hadn't spoken, and 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 I think Dad shook Niall's hand, and Mum gave him a hug, and then they and Mum said, "Come on, let's go," and so they all sort of went out, and I just remember Niall and I just giving each other a massive hug, and I guess it was really reassuring that we sort of had that. Now we've had that bond,
Yeah.
and it's also, I say, we're sort of half blood brothers, because he got stabbed in the arm, then I got stabbed, so I got some of his blood, but he never
Yeah.
got any of mine. So but yeah, that morning was, it was really nice for I think my parents,
Yeah.
to meet Niall and his family, and just put name to face,
Yeah.
and actually meet the person who saved my life, and then sort of, yeah, and during that week, I'll sort of go back a bit. I was having nightmares, or not nightmares. I was replaying the attack over and over and over while I slept, and it was like a video just
Yeah.
going over and over and over. And the Alfred psychiatrist came in and was sort of speaking to me about how I was going and whatever. And I said, "Oh, look, this is happening." And he said, "Have you given your statement?" And I said, "No, that's happening on Saturday." And he said, "Well, I think after you've given your statement, you won't be
Yeah.
dreaming about this." And I thought, that's a crock. Anyway, did a statement, watched the footy, on Saturday, and then after that, the dreams stopped. Yeah, so it was that, I guess, the concern of, so am I going to get this right? Am I going to say something wrong that's
Well,
going to... Yeah.
I would imagine you're second guessing yourself
Yep,
too. Like,
totally.
should have we done? And that's
Yep.
that's the unfair part with well, not the unfair part. And I keep clarifying that we've got to be accountable, but the questions are, well, should have you gone out more tactical? Should have you done this? Should have you done that? And there's a lot of naysayers in there that trying to poke holes in everything that you've done, and you would know that someone's died. You're going to go for a coronial inquest.
Yep.
We'll get on to that. But I just see when you're talking about it, how like it digs up still the raw emotions, and we're talking 10 years ago.
Yep.
Niall, how does it feel, you sitting here with Matt saying you saved his life?
Yeah, look, this is always the emotional part of when we speak around it. That hospital meeting, hearing those words, I've heard it from Matt's dad before. "Thanks for saving my boy." I've heard it from one of Matt's best mates that it gets me every time because it's a responsibility that uh, once you're a police officer and you're out on a job,
Yeah.
you will do anything to save your
Yeah.
colleague's life, irrespective of how long you've worked with them for. It good has to beat evil every single day in regard to
Yeah.
it. So there's a lot of phrases within policing and labels that are put on people, but to have a comment like that I've saved someone's life is words can't describe it. But I also throw back that Matt saved my life too, as in saying those words, knife gave me the time
Yeah.
and the opportunity to do what I needed to do. And Matt, of course, absorbed a ferocious attack. And we're only talking seconds, but that
Yeah.
was enough
Frenzy.
for me to be able to then save his life by him taking on Hader hand on hand,
Yeah.
essentially.
It's heavy, guys, but yeah, when the chips were down, you both did what you had to do. So yeah, like full credit to you. We all always think how you're going to react in a situation if you had that, and you'd like to think I'm going to do
Mm.
this and going to do that. You don't know until it happens, and you both did your duties,
And
and
yeah, and you don't know how you're going to react either.
yeah,
Like, you do your training and you think, oh yeah, if something happened, I would just do this, this, and this, and you don't know how your body is going to naturally react. Like, I said, I
the
lost my
adrenaline, yeah,
hearing, the fine motor skills and everything like that. And I think, y- all the reporting, the CCTV footage shows us walking out and then
yeah,
me cutting back in, and that was 75 seconds. But the attack itself was like 12 seconds
yeah,
from the
yeah,
time that Niall was stabbed to the time that Hader was shot. It felt so much longer and time slowed down,
yeah,
and and we were talking about it and describing it before, probably over 15, 20 minutes, however long it took to describe. But from the like I said, that 12 seconds, it's two breaths,
yeah, yeah.
two deep breaths, and you're that's it. It's
And
it's
all
over.
those things
Yeah.
that have occurred.
And that, that 12 seconds, and I think the coroner said it in his findings, um, our lives have been changed immeasurably, and from that small amount of time,
Yeah,
yeah, it certainly have.
that's dramatic. There's another thing I wanted to raise, and I'm not raising it because I'm raising it because I was reading up about this incident and comments that were attributed to you guys. That you've also got empathy for the family, for
Mm.
Hader's family.
Yeah.
That because it's you did what you had to do. It was your duty, and I'd also say you probably, if it wasn't you two, it could have been someone else, and the situation might have been worse. So yeah, you did what you had to do, but you're not sitting here full of bravado, going, "Well, this was a great day of policing." You've got thoughts for the family.
Yeah, definitely. Like we said, lovely family, invited us into their home, spoke freely and openly
Mm,
about Newman and their concerns about him, and you could see that the love that they had for him,
mm,
just through those concerns and how much they cared. Like, it wasn't it wasn't for want of a better term, a typical crook family where
mm,
everyone was against the police. They were pro police. They were wanting their son. They wanted him not to be radicalized. They wanted him to, continue on. And, when they're, and I think, I don't think a lot of people sort of give them that much thought, but, they're victims in this as much as anyone else is. And, they've lost, while we're fortunate to be alive and to be with our families, and not saying that we haven't had
mm.
our psychological issues over the years, but we're here now, and we can hold our loved ones and be with them. They lost a son that night, and it wasn't anything that they did.
Mm.
It was just the process that radicalization process that Newman went through, and and they paid the price also.
You feel the same?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, Gary. I look at this one and go, it would have been nice if there was a different outcome and
Yeah,
they could visit their son in prison every weekend or
yeah,
whatever it is, like others get to do. But as Matt said, them for their family unit that broke up that night.
mm,
The father, we know he inquired about our welfare and hopefully we were recovering.
says
And
a lot, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. Exactly right.
Mm,
And I've said it previously. I'd love to meet the family one day in
mm,
regard to it and provide any context or clarity that they needed to, because with the coronial process, as you know, it's very much each organisation has their own ideas on how it transpired,
yeah,
and they don't want negative findings held against them. So
yeah.
sometimes it's, well, all the time, it's quite emotionally overwhelming. So if we could sit with them and fill them in with any details they needed to know,
Yeah.
that'd be great as well.
The fact they've put the offer out and yeah, whether they take the offer up is a choice for themselves, but it says a lot about you guys that you would sit down and have a chat. It frustrates me the people that radicalise these impressionable young men, and that's it's a shame we can't keep go after the people that do that, because the impact is yeah at 18, you don't know what the world's about, do you? And you have someone putting thoughts in your head, and the young bloke that Curtis Chang shooting up there at New South Wales Police Headquarters. It's a terrible thing. How long after this incident did the coronial inquest take place? Because there's pressure there, because you've got to, your statements get presented to the coroner. Coroner makes a determination into the manner and cause of death, and recommendations if there's police practices and procedures could have been done something differently. So again, you're under scrutiny there. It's not a case of you going in there and everyone's clapping you. It's you going in there, could have you done this? And a lot of naysayers, and you bring in the legal intellects that come in and go, well, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? How was your experience in the coroner's inquest?
Yeah, you're right with that, Gary. So with the coronial, because it was terrorism, the coroner wanted to hear this matter as soon as possible.
Yep.
So I think it was around 18 months after the shooting. I think it was around April
March
2016,
March
March
2016.
2016. So, and again, we've spoken about it, accountability, transparency. So I looked at all my training within Victoria Police that led me to that point to make sure I didn't have any blind spots, that I knew how I was communicating with a youth, for example, what my strategies were, investigation plans. So there was a lot of fanatical work to make sure I could present the best
Mm,
evidence I could for
yeah.
the coronial, because essentially it is about discovering the truth of the death and how do we prevent these occurring. Now, terrorism in 2014, Matt spoke of, we were previously investigating foreign fighters going offshore, and now we were seeing homegrown terrorism where targets
Mm,
in Australia were being attacked. So this really needed to look at radicalisation, how it was occurring, what can be done to stop that or slow that. So it took that March 2016 period. Now, at that stage, one of my very good mates, Steve Cooper, an inspector with Victoria Police, we took up running together because I thought I don't want to be not in a position to present the best evidence I can. And
yeah.
if my brain says to me, no, stop, then I'm going to fall over. I lose, my family lose, policing loses, my mates lose. So I'm going to run. I'm going to train my brain that it will only stop when I say to. So we started running, lost a lot of weight, and the mental strength that came from running
Yeah.
was really important for the coronial process.
Yeah.
Because if there was anything negative, I could then go for a run and get the endorphins naturally from that,
Yeah.
compared to having a chocolate bar or a beer or
Oh,
whatever it is.
the huge benefits.
Absolutely. So, Matt gave evidence before me, uh, and then I came into the box on a Thursday night at about 3 p.m. Got my statement out. I read that. That was a really emotional time. I'd read my statement hundreds of times with no emotion. And then when I physically read it to the court, there was a couple of times I broke down because it was just so the enormity of this situation. This is a coronial. There's a family of a
The
deceased member
family of the
there.
person that you've shot and killed sitting
Exactly
in the
right.
court.
And the
Yeah.
expectations of the Commonwealth and the state in regard to our training and evidence to be given.
Yeah.
So it got adjourned at 4 p.m. So I'd given our evidence for 1 hour and then had to go home that night and sleep and then prepare for the next day. And I felt like a night watchman in cricket. Essentially, I'd been bombarded for an hour and then had to sleep on it overnight until
Yeah.
coming back in. The evidence in itself, having given evidence in all the courts, it was okay, but it was a relief to be able to finally stand down from the box, knowing that everything we'd experienced had been spoken of and given to the courts for them to make
Transparent.
determinations. Absolutely,
Yeah.
because that really is the key to what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Your experience giving evidence?
Yeah, it was a bit. It was so leading up to it. I was, just in my own head, about how's this going to go, and I think the psychological pressure of what was coming up in relation to the inquest really, really, really got to me, and I was probably the worst person in the world to be. Well, I know I was probably one of the worst persons in the world to be around. I was just angry, and I'd yell at my kids just for them breathing wrong and this sort of thing. So I was this is sort of this January, February, so leading up, reading my statement, talking to lawyers, th- you know, thinking about what's going to happen at the inquest, what are they going to ask, how are they going to portray me and all this sort of stuff. And, and to the point where my marriage ended
Right.
around the same sort of
That's
time.
a cost.
Yeah. And look at it, it wasn't a planned thing to happen at that time, but, anyway, my marriage ended, and so that had happened and going into the inquest. So it was all this, I was just in my own head, and and then when I gave evidence, we did it remotely because there was a bit of security. There was some security concerns about it, and so that was a bit sort of surreal. And only I think the coroner and the coroner's assistant could see us on the video screen, and so I guess in a sense it was a bit of a relief to be remote,
Yeah.
not being in the room and just having everyone staring at you and and looking around and seeing the family. So you're a bit more removed. So that was probably not a bad thing, but it was still
The pressure.
pretty intense. And I remember around that time when I was, like I said, I was just angry person. And I said before, my youngest son was in the hospital room next to my oldest and my ex-wife, and he was just emotionless. And I said, well, that's a bit weird. It was a couple of months later that I spoke to him, and I said, mate, I think he was probably 14. He was probably 12. He was 12 at the time of the attack, and I said, you know what? I remember being in the emergency room, and you were standing there just emotionless. And he said, I didn't want to cry because I didn't want to upset you. And that sort of stuck with me.
Hard.
And I went, how does a 12-year-old, come to this?
Have to feel that.
And then leading up to the inquest, when I was angry and all this was sort of happening, and I walk in one day and there's a little post-it note on the kitchen bench with a paperweight.
Yeah.
And it said, "Dear Dad, no matter how angry you get, I will still love you." And signed my son. And and
Jesus.
yeah, and you think, what have I done to to all you people? And it took me quite a long time to realize that my family lived the attack with me. Other than the attack itself, they were in the hospital room until now. They see my ups and downs, and I mean, there's less downs now, but during that initial time, and it was really hard on them, and I think, yeah, there was, and we'll probably talk about what happened later on,
Mm.
but it was, yeah, the inquest was pretty tough mentally
Yeah.
for me, and then leading into the to the findings, it was still,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Well,
still in your own head, yeah,
been in policing long enough to know, yeah, you can't really anticipate how
no,
the court's going to find it. Look, you look at one thing and it'll come out different.
yep,
I'm sorry you've gone through that. That's heavy stuff, and with your kids, and you don't want to bring your work home,
no,
and you think you're protecting them, and really you haven't protected them at all, have you?
no,
They're exposed to a lot of it, but
yep,
yeah, I'm sorry you went through that, and it just. I think what is coming across speaking to you two guys is that you survived the incident. It should be on the movies. It's high fives and everyone goes out for a drink and yeah, look, we've done our job, but it doesn't play out that way in
no.
real life, does it? Um, the emotional impact it had on relationships for you and your life. It's
Yeah, I concur with Matt. It's being in the center of that incident. It was like being in the eye of a storm, essentially.
yeah,
It's calm enough for us while we're in it, but the impact is being felt for our immediate families and the broader policing communities as well, and the clubs and associations we're involved in. So there's a significant impact. And to this day, I'll still get people come up to me and say, "Oh, by the way, I did such and such in your incident,"
mm,
and those stories come out slowly in regard to it. After the coronial, myself and Matt and some of our colleagues from Victoria Police and the Federal Police on the Sunday of the coronial finishing, we ran in the Herald Sun Run for the kids,
all right,
16 kilometres, and we managed to get that done. And after that, I felt the need to run stopped because I'd given them evidence. My brain
yeah,
was trained to do that. But after the coronial had finished, I remember speaking to Joe Garzas, he was the Victoria Police psychologist in the peer support unit, and he goes, "Well, now that the coronial's ended, and yes, there'll be findings down the track, but you'll feel like a part of you's gone because you're no longer focusing on that
mm,
incident. So you'll need to find something else to focus on." So for me, when you go through a critical incident, it brings you to the crossroads of your well-being. What direction do I take from here? And for me, I thought, well, if I can be promoted, I'll put my heart and soul into policing even more because of the awakening of a police shooting. I want
mm,
to make sure that my police colleagues are safe, that they're trained appropriately, that they're briefed according to the risk. The risk factors are known and disseminated. So for me, this created real opportunity to throw back in and give back to policing of the experience.
yeah,
So I spoke within policing to peer support, to the OST people about the benefits of our training on that night, and one word saved our lives. The ANZ counterterrorism TAC commanders course. So giving back in all these different units within
yeah,
policing to say that yes, we can go through these incidences, we can survive, we can grow with it, but by working so hard and being so driven in my work, that leads to burnout and everything else
yeah,
that comes with that, where you're just so focused that you lose sight of the glimmers of the sunshine, happy moments with family because you're just so focused and driven about what your job is. So for me, I certainly struggled to then go back into normal uniform policing where you're seeing gaps. You're seeing gaps where there needs to be something put in place. And the poor police members I was working with were oblivious to those
mm,
gaps. So for me, I felt the obligation to, it's my job to make sure they're appropriately trained and protected. So in essence, that is a thankless task and it's one that we're probably never ever going to win. So I'd bitten off a challenge that I had no chance
that was
of
going to destroy you.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And as a result, that's exactly what it did from a professional perspective. That's destroyed me by having minimal people within policing checking in on me I
Mm.
was the one doing the checking in on everyone else, making sure they're okay, with no one actually saying, "Hey, you're pretty strong and resilient. How are you going?"
Yeah.
Those conversations just weren't happening in policing, and unfortunately, nowadays I still don't think they're occurring. Hence, so many injuries that are occurring. And in July this year, a couple of my very good policing mates who have been involved in high-profile shootings, they've been ill health, retired themselves. So
Yeah.
there's some issues there around how we support our members that have been through these critical
I
instances.
got the sense in speaking to you, militant's probably too strong a word, but you had that strong take on looking after members and after what you've been through. I think, yeah, you've got a right to offer opinions on that, and I can understand, yeah, where you channeled your energies in there. But if you fight town hall, it can be pretty soul destroying too.
Yeah,
And
correct.
if you take it on, I neglected to ask what was the findings from the coroner when the coroner's findings were handed down. What did the coroner have to say?
I think it was like 56 pages of findings,
Yep.
and believe it or not one recommendation.
No, well, yeah, yeah.
So, like he said,
Well,
you know,
yeah,
he said he makes. So
yeah,
I'd come back from PNG. I was posted over to Port Moresby with the AFP, and I flew back for the
yeah,
for the handing down of the findings, and we were in the AFP headquarters in Latrobe Street at the time, watching it remotely. And there was a few of us in there, people we'd worked with, and my dad had actually flown down and to be there with me, and we were sitting there, and he read through, and then he said, I and because like you said before, it's in your head. Have they sat down for the last? This was July or June or July
mm,
2017. So this is almost 3 years later. So you're sitting there. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, they've had almost 3 years to go through this shooting with a fine tooth comb.
yeah,
Are they going to pick something out and go, "You did wrong. You're going to be charged"? So knowing, like, it was in my heart, I knew we had done nothing
yeah,
wrong, but in my head, I'm overthinking stuff, and just because you hear of it often, that the coroner will make some sort of
yeah.
finding about the police actions and whatever. And um, I remember sitting there, and we're in the room, and he said, I pretty sort of paraphrasing, but you know I can't find any issues with the police risk assessment that
Yeah.
day. Um, you know, I'd like to, wish my condolences to the family, and especially officers A and B whose lives have been changed immeasurably. And then, yeah, he said that there was nothing that he could find, that we were in the clear, I
Yeah.
guess, for what we did. And when he said that, I just turned to my dad and hugged him and cried.
Mm.
It was a massive moment and a huge sense of relief that we didn't do anything wrong.
It's and again, I get back to the fact that the way that you've explained it and every step that you take seemed to me, from a police officer's point of view, perfectly reasonable.
Mm.
And you guys would have known that too. You're experienced police officers at the time, but you go through all this trauma thinking that there's going to be criticism
Hmm.
of you in regards to your actions, or you shouldn't have done this, or why didn't you do that? And I don't know why we've got that mindset in the police, but I understand where you're coming from. And any time I've been involved in incidents, you're thinking, what are they going to find? We've done
Yep.
something wrong.
So certainly with ours, there was some potential criticism about the location of the meet. Was that appropriate? Was there enough lighting? As you know, within policing, we work in all sorts of conditions in all
See,
locations.
let's zero in on next, because that would be the type of things that would really give me the shits with it. You've done really well to actually get him to get him to a meeting. Like, you could have spent 2 weeks looking for him, but you've managed to taking controlled risks, make the phone call there, take it, and then if people sit back not involved in it go, well, why didn't you do this, or why couldn't you have waited till the next day? Well, the next day he mightn't have turned up. Little things like
Yep.
that. They're the things that irk me when you get scrutinised
Yeah,
on jobs. But
absolutely.
you're making operational decisions in real time. Like that phone call, once he picked up the phone, you had 5 minutes basically to think, okay, how are we going to do this? Whereas someone reviewing it, as you said, could have 3 months to review it and go, well, perhaps they should have made the appointment for a later time
Yep.
and had, yeah.
And
Yeah.
hindsight's a wonderful thing in that I know that there were evidence was given by senior police that if all the information had been known and available to us, we wouldn't have met with him. So that was where I was talking about that
Yeah, yeah,
that lack of intelligence
yeah.
flow from ASIO to the AFP and VicPol, and um, it's and you sort of look at that and go, so
Mm,
you sort of, but talking about the inquest, um, you know, leading up to it and after the attack,
mm,
and I was self-doubting myself. Why didn't I control the gun? Why didn't I try and control the knife? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that?
yeah,
Why did I, so yeah, like you're right. You just, you're self-critiquing yourself, but in a negative way. So it putting more pressure on yourself, more pressure and more
yeah.
pressure.
How
Yep.
it's now 10 years after the incident. How are you guys now? Like we're sitting here talking, but this, in your quiet moments, is it's still something that lives with you every day?
Um, yes and no. Um, like I don't think of the attack itself
Yeah.
every day. I don't think. They sort of reminded. Um, you just look in the mirror, you're doing your hair or whatever, and you see the scar.
Well,
And
I don't know because I don't look in the mirror to do my hair.
I do it
That
very,
was a low shot.
very brief. Or
Yeah,
have a shave or
yeah,
something. But yeah, you just sort of it's there. Like
yeah,
it's a constant reminder. Not that you think about it all the time.
yeah.
Um, but it is there for me. And but saying that, like you know f- I've gone through a lot of psychological trauma over the last 10 years in relation to PTSD and suicidal thoughts and those sort of things. But now with a sort of I know the term gets thrown around quite regularly, that this post-traumatic growth, and I've certainly experienced that, and it's changed the way that I am. I'm not
Mm,
saying I'm not perfect, and you ask my fiance and she'll say no, he's not perfect. um, but without her and your family being around to support you, and them seeing that growth, that's probably been one of the biggest things over the last, probably since 2018. So the last
okay.
8 years, slowly but surely, and then certainly over the last 5 years, just being able to be a better person. And I said it recently. I never used to tell my kids that I love them, or I'd speak to my mum and dad on the phone, and I never say I love you, or my sister or my brother, or um and now it's whether my boys want to hear it, I've after a phone call, or saying good night,
Yeah,
it's like I love you. And you get it back most of the time, and you say it to your mum, and you just know that, and my partner, and um you know it's something that it was a terrible situation and a terrible time, the attack, the inquest, and then the findings, and then going through that PTSD and the down and the dark and the everything that goes with that. But I think we've spoken about it, Noel and I, and we wouldn't change. I don't think we would change being involved in the attack, because without it, it wouldn't have made me
made you who
the
you are.
person I am today. Yep.
Yeah, I get to the opportunity of speaking to a lot of people who've been through some serious stuff in the vein of what you've been through and that. And I think, as you said, life can be fleetingly short. So you're telling your kids you love them, or
Mm.
thinking about things, and you don't sweat little things as much
Try not
because
to. Yeah.
you realise how yeah tenuous life can be. What about the impact it's had on you 10 years
Well,
down the track?
unlike Matt, I've got an 11-year-old daughter, so I've got no chance of her telling me that she loves me. So that will occur in another 20 years' time, probably.
We'll have you back in 5 years' time and
Exactly.
how you went. Yeah.
Exactly. Same as Matt. So I was diagnosed with PTSD and other conditions in 2021. So I'd ignored a lot of symptoms and thinking again, we're in policing, we're all struggling from different things that we see and experience. So for me, actually getting diagnosed and treatment plans and then support is absolutely key to it.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and it's a pretty simple step, but my psychologist, Fairley Morgan, she put me onto a book written by a Dr. John Arden, talks about the five good steps in mental health, which is sleep, exercise, education, diet, and social support.
Mm.
Now, I don't do all of those very well each day, but it is a task to try and tick as many of those off as possible.
Gives you a framework.
Absolutely, which I look at it, the acronym of SEEDS, it's pretty simple. But then having the time now, being ill health retired from policing, to actually catch up with people that you want to
Yeah.
actually engage with them in a stress-free setting where you're not making life or death decisions is good for me. But I'll agree with Matt. There is also growth because we've met some exceptional people along the way. Other police who have been involved in shootings. We're both members of the Australian Bravery Association. And there's an incredible group of people that have been from police, military, emergency services, and civilians. People fighting sharks. People, Darryl Tree from South Australia with a Cross of Valour award for saving a father and son being electrocuted. Like these are amazing acts of courage and gallantry that we're proud to be a part of it. And with those like minded people, there's absolute strength that comes from it as well, where we don't sit there and talk about our incidences, but we talk about the good things in life and what's next week look like, what are we looking forward to.
Yeah.
So there's a real lot of positive issues that's come from that shooting. $650 million federally was allocated towards counterterrorism after the shooting
On the
and
back of
Lynn
that.
Cafe
Yeah.
siege. Metadata retention laws changed as a result. So if our incident had have just been a stop go incident and move on, then you look at it and go, we lost. But the legacy that came out of that is really significant. I know
Yeah.
Matt's done public speaking and
Who was it? Sounds like a pretty big deal. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, that was in 2022, and I was having some troubles at work at the time, as in PTSD and needing to move, and I was actually on sick leave in that August, and I got a phone call from Yvonne Crozier, who's one of the AFP. She's a FILO, Field Investigative
Yep.
Liaison Officer, so she was in charge of that area. But I'd had something to do with her, and she said, do you want to come on this? Come to New York and go to the Congress of Victims of Terrorism, and it was like, yes, that'd be awesome. And anyway, so I sort of got back to work, and we went over early September. Oh, no, sort of late September, because it was the 21st anniversary
Yeah.
of the September 11 attacks when we were there, and had the opportunity to address the Congress, and it was only a short time, 3 minutes, but it was nice to be able to put relay mine and Niall's experiences around the attack, but also how our work had affected us, and and that sort of thing. And while it was only 3 minutes, I think I got the point across. But saying that, I got back to work, and thinking, this is wow. I spoke at the UN. There was all these people
Yeah.
there, and how cool is this? And I got back to work, and there was crickets, and I think the only comment I got was, "How was your junket?" And I'm thinking, I wouldn't have been on this
That misses the point, doesn't it?
trip if
Yeah.
if I hadn't have been almost killed,
Yeah.
8 years ago or whenever what was, and so it just left this, this dirty sort of taste in my mouth, and then sort of some other things at work happened, and I was, it was just, it was sort of almost the last straw, I guess, and that's, I've been off work, 2 years this
Yeah.
month. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, like those little comments like that, it speaks to the culture of a lot of police organisations, just the negative they drag you down, like the junket. How was the junket? Like
Yeah.
people should have been going, really proud of you. That must have been a
Yeah.
great experience. And how different would that make you feel than, oh, how was your junket? There's a cynicism in organisations that's quite frustrating.
Sorry, and you said
yeah.
before, that, you don't sweat the little things, but the little things can make a massive difference.
Adds up.
So that little comment,
Yeah.
as well as other things, just it just, and when you've got PTSD, things like that are magnified enormously. So yeah, I guess it hurt, and yeah, so
Okay. No, I think when you explain it that way, I can understand that you come back, you're proud, and then you just drag back down into the world. Now, Niall, 2019, you got to present the match day football Hawthorn versus Collingwood game.
Yeah.
That was after getting the Bravery Award and different things. Do you want to tell us about
Yeah, that's
that?
right. So myself and Matt have received Commonwealth Bravery medals, the Australian Federal Police Bravery Medal, and I was lucky enough to receive the Victoria Police Valour Award. So Chief Commissioner Graham Ashton, he nominated me for the Emergency Services Person of the Year. So as a result of that, presenting the match day football to the umpires at the MCG on a Friday night, the Hawthorn Collingwood game, 65,000 people in police uniform, which is really incredible to see the recognition for emergency services workers, not just myself, but for all of us recognising the work that we do. So really proud moment to be there and being part of that.
Okay. Well, look, guys, I think we might wrap it up on this note. I want to say the way that you've articulated your journey that you've been through, and the experience, and the way that you're looking at policing and what it's done. I want to thank you for the services that you've done, and I don't say that lightly. I sit here, I know the price that you guys have paid, and you've paid in a big way, but you should be proud of what you did. And you've been tested at that real sharp end, and no one knows how they're going to react. And the way that you guys reacted, you should be proud of. So, hope best for the future, and stay positive. And thanks for coming on I Catch Killers.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you inviting us in.